Hello and welcome to the ManageIQ Sprint 155 review. This was a regular 2-week sprint. I will give the overview. Harpreet will update us on the UI, Adam on the providers, Joe on the platform, Alberto on the API, and Jason on the developer experience. So this sprint we had 198 pull requests opened and 158 merged. So at a good clip here. Not as high as last sprint, but a lot of times that's because there are like a bunch of little PRs that kind of get blasted out and then merged. So I'm not sure if that was the case there. In terms of distribution, we had 63 PRs were enhancements, 26 as bugs. I think that the enhancements are there because we're trying to get to the end of the next release, the Alaska release, which we're kind of hoping to start branching and working on soon. And with that, I will turn it over to Harpreet.
Thank you, Oleg. Hello, everyone. Total of 18 PRs were merged in UI repos. There were 14 enhancements, 3 bug fixes, and 1 React form conversion. During this sprint, 1 more form for visual settings under My Settings area was converted over to DDF and React. Also, Carbon component mapper was added to our DDF forms. Old Patternfly 3 component mapper in all our DDF forms has been replaced with this new mapper. We have some custom components that are added to this mapper. So please see the PR for the further information of those components. And for enhancements during Sprint 153, Policy Profiles Explorer was converted over to be a non-explorer screen. There was a work in progress to convert rest of the objects related to policy to be the same. So these changes were made during the sprint. All of the policies, conditions, actions, events, alert profiles, and alerts screens are now converted into non-explorer screens. What this does is it presents user with a flat list of objects instead of tree on the left side. And the list now has checkboxes, sortable. The lists are sortable, and it also gives you paging options. And also, when you're on the list views, there are more options in the toolbar buttons than before. Previously, there was just an add button, but now there are more options like edit and delete, stuff like that. Please try these screens out and feel free to open any GitHub issues if you find any issues or if you see anything is missing from their previous version. This change also gives a user a direct access to these screens with their own individual URLs. Also, in the last sprint, host initiator list and summary screens were added. During the sprint, support to add a new host initiator and refresh relationships and power state support was added for host initiators. Under storage, block storage, a new submenu was added to display list and detail screen for volume mappings. And I have a few slides for the rest of the enhancements. So next slide, please. Chargeback support for configured systems was added. So now on the detail screen, you should be able to see CPU and memory information. Also, chargeback is added to the list of options in show costs by dropdown. And on the chargeback assignment screen, option to assign tags for configured systems was added. Next slide, please. Support to group chargeback VMs and chargeback container projects report by multiple tags was added. Next slide, please. And also the support to filter these reports by multiple tags was added. And that's all I have for the UI. Over to Adam.
Thanks, Harpreet. So for providers on the core side, Oleg refactored a number of host scanning methods to use support features mixins. Previously, we just included some empty methods in the core base host class and called them blindly in the scanning method for host smart state. So now we're actually checking supports feature mixins before calling those. He also deleted a number of unused VM methods. There are a few lookup by path and find by path methods that were no longer used, so they were cleaned up. On the AutoSD side, as Harpreet mentioned, they added volume mappings, which connect host initiators to cloud volumes on the physical storage side. And coming up shortly, you'll be able to create a new volume mapping, which will complete the end-to-end part of being able to define a connection for an AutoSD physical storage. On the IBM Terraform side, they added the collection of CPU and memory for configured systems. This is what's needed for chargeback support by allocation. So now when you provision with IBM Terraform, we are able to collect the configured CPU and memory and save that as a hardware record on the configured system, in addition to enabling chargeback support, which Harpreet showed. Next slide. For IBM Cloud Power, Jay added support for provisioning SAP HANA systems. Kuldeep improved the debug logging, and Jay also fixed the system pools flavors parser. On the VMware side, we fixed an issue with targeted refresh of VMs that had automation SDK labels. These are only being set during full refresh because there's not an event-driven parser for them. And if a VM got targeted after the first full refresh, it was trying to save labels and something was failing, so we fixed that up. We also fixed an issue where a save inventory thread was being leaked if the collector crashed and got restarted. So after 5 crashes, we ran out of database connections. So now we actually refactored the way that the save inventory thread is started. So that cleaned that up a nice bit. Next slide. So this is exciting news. On the Amazon side, we added support for the new Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service. We're treating it as a container manager, and it actually makes use of a lot of the work that Jason did in prior sprints to allow subclassing of container managers. Previously, we would have had to do this with a lot of mix-ins, and this just made it a lot easier for us to just say Amazon EKS Container Manager is a type of a Kubernetes container manager. So what that allowed us to do is bring all of the existing refresh code over without having to redefine anything. Essentially, the only thing we had to do was implement raw connect because Amazon uses an STS certificate ticket to authenticate to Kubernetes. So we're actually using the existing access key and secret key that you would use for an Amazon Cloud Manager. We're using those same credentials to ask for an STS certificate and then connect that way. So minimal changes required for the user to be able to add an EKS container manager. And because we subclass from Kubernetes, streaming refresh is supported just naturally. If we go to the next slide, we'll have a short demo. So here is the what EKS would look like if you go to your Amazon console. So you can define multiple clusters. Each cluster is a container manager on the ManageIQ side. So you can see we've got a test cluster here. The things you'll need to be able to add the cluster is going to be the API endpoint, and you can see we've got a couple of pods here. You'll need the name of the cluster and the API endpoint to be able to add the EKS cluster. So you can see we've got the server endpoint there. That's going to be the host name for ManageIQ. So here you can see we've got EKS as the type. We're going to give it a name. These are all the regions from Amazon, so this is exactly the same as your Amazon Cloud Manager. We need the cluster name to be able to get the valid STS token. So that's why that's there. And then this is the host name that we pulled. Already deleted these access keys, so don't get any funny ideas. All right, so that validated out. And so what that does is it used the access key secret key to request an STS ticket and do the validation. Everything else is all the same from the Kubernetes provider. So if we go and check this out, obviously the dashboard doesn't have everything on it yet, but it's starting up a worker and starting the refresh now. And so you can see the authentication validated successfully, and shortly we should have inventory to check out. forget if I got it on the first refresh or the second. I think it was the second. There we go. So I've got a successful refresh. We can go back and check out the dashboard. Not a lot of inventory here. 2 nodes, a couple of pods, some projects. If we go and check out the pods, I'm going to do a short demo of a streaming refresh. So we're going to delete one of these pods. So you can see that TNRGJ pod was present in the dashboard there. I just deleted it and refreshed this page. You can see it's that last one there. And once we refresh, it's immediately gone and replaced with a new one. So what I was showing there was we deleted a pod. Amazon immediately scaled up a second one when it saw that there was supposed to be 2 and there wasn't. And so we picked up the pod delete and the pod create essentially real time. And that is it for providers. Over to Joe.
Looking good, Adam. This past sprint, there were 28 PRs merged in the platform space. This slide highlights the most noteworthy, starting with enhancements. Brandon had contributed a few. One to support Postgres with SSL certificates. Another to limit the scope of the default deny network policy to pods labeled with the app name as defined in their CR. He added support to attempt to use a default image poll secret. And he contributed a PR to validate the authentication type in CRs and only allow support events. Alberto added a couple of enhancements too. He added support for an optional image reference instead of using the image name image tag pairs. However, if the optional image reference is not specified, the default will be the image name image tag. And Dan Hawkins and Brandon contributed enhancements to the backup and restore documentation. For bugs, Brandon fixed a bug to address an error message, no matches for kind network policy. And Jason contributed a couple of PRs to address some technical debt. That's it in the core platform space. On to the API.
All right, thanks, Joe. So for this sprint, we had a handful of new endpoints that came in on the API. First one here is by Liron, adding support for host initiators. Showing here the query of the resources and then the individual resource, the post for the create, and as well as there's the refresh action that can be done on the resource or doing it on multiple with the bulk action, refresh. Next slide, please. Okay, Lucy introduced the Pixie image types endpoint, showing the first collection here. We have the get of querying the Pixie image types, an individual resource, or doing a bulk query to fetch several at the same time. The post for the create. Then we have the edits, the post with the action edits, or doing a push or a put or a patch on the resource. And then we have the delete action, either a post action or a delete HTTP verb. Next slide, please. Okay, Lucy also introduced the ISO data stores. Here showing the endpoint for the ISO data stores, as well as the bulk query for it, post for creating them, and then the equivalent for the deletes, doing the delete action or the delete HTTP verb. Next slide, please. Okay, Lucy also introduced time profiles. Similar set of endpoints. So we have the gets, the bulk query, the creates, the 3 edits with the post, put, and patch, as well as the deletes. And next slide, please. Okay, Nick enhanced the querying of the settings, where we now support the arbitrary path on an individual region, server, or zone endpoint. Showing here the signatures and as well as an example, for example, getting API servers to settings, and then you can specify the path of the settings that you're interested in, and showing you how that's being returned from the top level down for that. Next slide, please. Okay, Gregory introduced volume mappings, showing here the gets. for the collection, for the resource, the creation with the post for the volume mappings, as well as the refresh action for both a resource and doing a bulk refresh. Next slide, and that's it for the API.
Okay, on the developer side, we had some changes to the bot for validations for cross-repo tests. In particular, we now check for when duplicate repo names with different branches and PRs are there. So if you accidentally include the same repo but two different PRs, the bot will now tell you, hey, this is not a valid request. Previously, it would actually try to generate that, and it could create some weird situations in the test itself. We also handle some invalid command formats. The first one there is if someone forgets a comma, it'll actually show up as the bot won't understand what to do with a repo named ManageIQ space ManageIQ gems pending, and it'll comment about that. And the other one is a typo. If someone types, instead of the word including, they type the word includes. And that'll come up similar in that the bot won't know what to do with a repo named ManageIQ gems pending space includes space foo. And so those, instead of actually sending it to Travis, it'll actually let you know, hey, something's wrong with your command and you can try again. If you find any other command things that are invalid, let me know and I can add those validations in as well. And that's it on the developer side.
All right. And that brings the sprint review to a close. The next sprint is scheduled to be in 2 weeks on March the 3rd, same time. And I want to thank everyone for their contributions and the presenters for setting all of the stuff up and presenting here. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.